the Ultimate Issues Hour. We talk about the great issues of life overwhelmingly on the Ultimate Issues Hour, which is the third hour of my Tuesday show. I'm Dennis Prager. Overwhelmingly, they are macro issues, the meaning of life, the purpose of life, anything from the political and the issue of, is a big state or a small state good? Is there a God? Do you need God for there to be good and evil? Is there free will? Are people basically good? Today is going to be a macro-micro issue. It's about our lives, not about a concept. But there's both, because there's a conceptual element here, too. Now, remember, the purpose of the Ultimate Issues Hour is to talk about the greatest issues of life, because they are increasingly ignored. With the 24/7 cycle of news, people are increasingly wrapped up in non-ultimate issues, right? You turn on the news and there's, the latest vote in Senate. And I'm not saying it's unimportant. Of course they're important. But they're all immediate measures. None of you would like to see a typical news day from a year ago. You would be bored out of your mind. You were riveted then. But with an ultimate issue, it doesn't matter when it was dealt with. That's why we still read Shakespeare, even though Shakespeare is no longer required at UCLA for those who major in English. Did you hear what I said? Shakespeare is no longer, you can get a degree in English at UCLA without having taken a Shakespeare course, without having read a play of Shakespeare. So there's been a war against ultimate issues, if you will. Today's ultimate issue is very different, and that is big families. The big family has been under assault, and let me hasten to say at the outset, I don't come from a big family, and I didn't have one myself. I have one sibling, and I have two children. So I just want to make clear that none of this is self-serving. Okay? None of what I say is self-serving, because then I have no credibility. Either what I say happens to be accurate or it isn't. Anyway, back to the subject. There has been an assault on the big family. What will there is no definition to big family, so let's say more than 4 children. Right? 5 or more, I think anybody today would say is a big family. They wouldn't have said it was a big family 100 years ago, or perhaps not even 50 years ago, but today that would be considered a big family. 4 children would be considered a big family. I've given this a lot of thought, and it was triggered most recently last evening, this very last evening. My wife and I had dinner at in a Catholic home, Roman Catholics, with 7 children. And if I'm not mistaken, the father came from a family of 7 children. So I asked, how many grandparents does his mother have? I mean, how many grandchildren does his mother have? And he said 43. To which, whenever I hear that or anything approximating it, I always ask, does she know all their names? And he said, of course she does. I didn't then ask, does she know all their birthdays? That would just be cutesy. So I looked at this family, and I have been with quite a number of families. I know a family with, and I hope I get the sum right, I think it's 11 children. And they are a religious Christian family. Well, I don't remember their denomination, though. To say evangelical is correct, I suspect, but I think it's more specific than that. And I know Orthodox Jewish families with 8, 9, 10 children. They're all religious. Every family that I know of with a lot of children is a religious family. The assault on the big family has been as follows, and it's not it's not an assault that is ill-natured. It's just an assault. It doesn't mean people who engage in it have bad motives. I'm not attributing that here. But there are a number of reasons for it. One is secularism. I mean, let's be honest. I think that's the biggest, actually. Because all the big families that we know, or that I know, are religious. I can't believe that that's an exception. I am sure that there are secular families with 8 children. I haven't met any. Let's put it that way. And I would love to know what their thinking was. And I don't mean combined families, though that's beautiful. I'm talking about one couple and that number of children. So one has been secularism. Religion, and I'll explain why later, has a very positive view of the large family. Another one has been feminism, where women have felt that having a lot of children will keep them from expressing their truest abilities, which may lie in business or in academia or in some other outside the home work. And there has been no prestige in motherhood. There is prestige in careerhood. People go where prestige goes. This is not an attack on such people. It is totally understandable. Or people just feel, forgetting prestige, people just feel, look, I'll have one child, and men too, obviously. One child, maybe 2, but beyond that, and then there's another factor, people feel it's very expensive. Having children today is considered to be very expensive. Now, the home that I was at last night was not a wealthy home. You could tell in every way. It was not a wealthy family by any means. This was rock solid middle class, not upper middle class by any stretch of the imagination. They make every penny count. I asked them, do you ever take the family out to a restaurant? And they looked at me like, what, are you kidding? And it doesn't happen. The husband and the wife will go out to a restaurant, and I'm glad that they do. The family that I know with 11 children, that family is absolutely, he's a teacher, and I believe she's full-time mom. So it has nothing to do with, well, we can't afford kids. Yes, you can afford kids. It depends what you decide is most important in life. Now, the reason I raise this is not just to discuss why we no longer have many, not just religious families, why we don't have many big families. It's the case, I would like to make a case based solely on what I have observed for having a lot of kids. What I have found has defied what you might learn about big families among the intelligentsia, who, by the way, as you know, the more a woman goes to college and graduate school, the fewer children she has. This is a statistic. This is not an observation of mine. So you may not imagine what I am about to say to be true, but it has been true in every case that I have witnessed. And I have been with every religious expression of a big family. Jewish, Catholic, evangelical, Mormon. I have been in their homes. I have been with them. I have, in some cases, almost lived with them. And this is the case with the 11 children, stay over at my home once a year. So I have an observation that is counterintuitive. 1-8-PRAGER-776, the Ultimate Issues Hour. This is the Ultimate Issues Hour on the Dennis Prager Show, the third hour on Tuesday. Some great issue. The great issue today is the case, and I'm going to make the case for having a lot of kids. Of course, this presupposes that you have a good marriage. That's an important factor here. If you have a wobbly marriage, you might not want to have that many kids. Although I'm not sure, it might be better for the kids, but that's not the issue. Because of the nature of my work, I get to meet a lot of people, and a lot of people of many different backgrounds. And I have been with families with a lot of kids from virtually every major religion in the United States. Indeed, every major religion in the United States. Incidentally, the family that I said had 11 who were, I said evangelical. They're evangelical. I thought that they were perhaps also in a specific denomination beyond that, but they're not. And so they have 12. They have actually stayed at my home. They rent a Greyhound bus to travel. I'm kidding, but they do have a large van, obviously, to take the family. I'm very close to a Jewish family that has 9 children. Last night I was with a Catholic family for dinner in their home with 7 children and many others. So here's what I want to tell you that's counterintuitive, but I have seen all the time. This is important. I have seen this in every instance that I observed this in their homes, in my home, etc. The kids are generally healthier. That doesn't mean that there aren't wonderful only children or wonderful children who have only one sibling, etc. Of course they exist. But I want to explain something, the counterintuitive part. The counterintuitive part is how each of them has been lively, full of a love of life, spirited, and individual. The only children that I have known have often been wonderful, etc., etc. I have no issue. But they have rarely had this extroverted spirit that I have found in the kids who come from a lot of siblings. I am sure that there are exceptions to this rule, as there are to every, but I haven't encountered one. Each is a very, very much an individual. You would think that it's cookie cutter, right? Your intuitive reaction would be 10 kids, cookie cutters. Same parents, same religion, same values, same clothing, right? Because it's almost always hand-me-down clothes, unless they're very, very wealthy. And even then, why not have hand-me-down clothes? And yet, they're not. They're unbelievably individual, different from one another. They're all almost characters. This has really been counterintuitive for what I would have expected from such homes. The older ones tend to raise the younger ones. Last night, I saw something that I'm sure no one else noticed. When my wife and I were leaving this home, this Catholic home, and the kids were just, one is more wonderful than the next. The oldest sibling, the sister, who happened to be a girl, who's at college, they were all saying goodbye to my wife and me. One of them, a younger one, I don't know how old he was, but he was, 12, I don't know. He had sat at the edge of the couch in the living room as we were all saying goodbye, and she just signaled with her head, stand up, or with her hand, a very slight motion, which I happened to notice, and he stood up. She's raising him. Parents who have a lot of kids know that. In other words, ironically, after a certain number, it actually gets easier because the older kids take care of the younger kids, which is unbelievably maturing for those kids. Now, here's another good thing. the helicopter parent can't exist with a lot of kids. You can't be at 8 different sporting events at the same time. So they don't show up much. And that's better for the children. The fewer the children, the more hovering parents do. My parents had 2 kids and didn't show up. Nor did Alan's parents show up. They had how many kids? 4 kids. You came from a big home. It was not expected. This is a brand new thing. I have to go to every soccer game, every tennis match, every football game, every basketball game. My parents came to 1 basketball game. Well, first of all, I only played a few seconds in any given game, and it was only when the team was guaranteed to lose. But when I played at Madison Square Garden, or might have, I did for 53 seconds, when it was mathematically impossible for my team to win before a New York Knicks game. That was it. That was the only time. And even though I ran to the wrong side of the court, I remember hearing my mother cheering. She wouldn't know what side of the court I ran anyway. So as far as she was concerned, I was doing a great job being alone with the referee. 1-8 776. So well, they don't get the individual attention. Great! That's great. That's actually an advantage. All right, I'll take your calls. For those of you meditating, contemplating the issue of how many children to have, may I say that I wish circumstances had enabled me to have a lot of children. They didn't. It's the way it goes, but so be it. I thank God for the 2 I have. Back in a moment. Oh, I got 40 seconds? Wow. So was the music on early? Guess who's going to the punishment room, folks, during the intermission? Oh, boy. You know, he got an award here at the station at the end of last year, and he has been so cocky since then. He's been insufferable. Yes, Triple G is I don't know if Gentle is any more part of it. He might be Double G. Just the Gentile Giant. I don't know if he's the Gentle Gentile Giant. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. This is the Ultimate Issues Hour, 3rd hour Tuesday, some great issue. The case for having a lot of kids is the ultimate issue today. Last night it just did it for me at this Catholic family that I had, my wife and I had dinner at this family's home, and they have 7 children, and they're wonderful, lively, happy-go-lucky, spectacular values, athletic. I mean, one is just as wonderful as the next. And that's exactly what I have found in all these other families. An Orthodox Jewish rabbi with whom I am close has 9 children. I traveled with him to Africa. I took my son. He took one of his 9. We know this fantastic family, unbelievable, 11 children from Texas, and the 11 are magnificent. What am I going to tell you? We lived with them for a weekend. Religious people as well, and it's just it can't be a coincidence. I mean, at a given point, you have to believe that your faculty of observation is not broken. All right, let's go to Marcy in Glendale, Arizona. Hello, Marcy. Dennis Prager.
Hey, Dennis. How are you?
Well, thank you.
I met you when when you were here in Phoenix, and I had just had my 6th child. And I got to talk to you about that for a minute. Do you remember me?
Yes, I do, because not many people tell me about that, yes.
Well, I just wanted your listeners to know that with every child, my life has become more and more complete, and it's really amazing. And no, we don't have a lot of money.
Yes, the notion that I can't afford it is I don't buy. I just don't buy. I understand it. I'm not blaming the people who make it. I just don't buy the reason. In no case of those that I know was it a wealthy family. One became wealthy when the kids were much older, but hardly wealthy when they had all of their children. Thank you, Marcy. That's a very important point. Eric in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Hi, Eric. Dennis Prager.
Hi, Dennis. Great topic. I'm thrilled to hear you talking about this. My wife and I have a strong marriage. I make a fair amount of money, but not a lot. And we felt like that we had almost a moral obligation to have a big family because we would be able to give a lot to these kids.
That's right.
And so we've had 5 children, and in every single way, it's made our lives better, and I recommend it. The only caution that I would raise for listeners is that one must be prepared for, and this could be just because of the area that we live in, be prepared for people to make snide or nasty little comments at times.
Like what? What? Give me an example.
Complete strangers.
Well, really? That's...
Oh my God! Are these all your kids? You didn't know when to stop. Why would you do this? Have you ever heard of contraceptives? I mean,
strangers would say this.
Strangers.
So you know what you should always say to these people? I'm just curious. What graduate school did you attend?
Well, the killer is I went to graduate school.
No, that's not the killer. Not everybody who goes has his values distorted.
Corrupted, right.
Yeah.
No, you're right. You're right. And they do treat, I think at times, my wife, and she's never said this to me, I could be stepping out of bounds, but at times I think my wife has felt like she's treated like a broodmare by other women for doing this. And to boot,
unbelievable.
Started homeschooling. But if you have thick skin and you're prepared to do it in every way.
Yes, anyway, you will be rewarded. It doesn't matter. You will be rewarded with wonderful children and many wonderful grandchildren. It's a reward. You're playing for the long stakes. It's amazing. Strangers to make comments? Can you imagine? See, you can't. It's amazing. There's probably more judgment in this society of people who have 6 children or more or 5 children or more than there is about people who have women who have children without a man. Isn't that amazing? This is another product. I don't want to say about what part of the political spectrum because I don't want to politicize the hour. So it's either a product of the left or the right. You choose. This way of judging. Can't judge having children without a husband, but you can judge people adversely for having a lot of children. You are listening to the Ultimate Issues Hour on the Dennis Prager Show. Hello, everybody. This is the Ultimate Issues Hour on the Dennis Prager Show, and a very different ultimate issue than the norm, if you will, and that is the case for having many children. I explained my experience last night with a Catholic family with 7 children, and that was the final straw. In general, these kids are happier, healthier, more individual, more self-reliant, and everything else good that I can say. Doesn't mean there aren't wonderful people from other families. Of course there are. It's not anybody who would infer otherwise doesn't think clearly. But the disproportionately healthy types that come out. I was talking earlier as well. I should do this as another Ultimate Issue show or just any other hour of the show. The hovering parent. I have a gentleman in the studio sitting in, and he mentioned to me that at Boeing, he's familiar with the head of, was it Human Resources? And this is a woman, and she was mentioning that it is not uncommon for employees who get poor assessments to call their mothers up and ask that the human resources people speak to their mother. That she told him of a 29-year-old guy who did this. I strongly suspect this 29-year-old is not married, because who would want to marry a 12-year-old man who happens to have a 29-year-old body? I believe it because it's one of these things that's impossible to make up. Speak to my mother? Wow. Okay. Let's go to Tom in Alvin, Texas. Is this the Tom who sends very funny emails regularly to Sean?
Well, my children would disagree, but yeah.
They would disagree that what? That you send that you're funny?
They would disagree to their humor, but they don't like my sense of humor. But anyway, yes, this is that Tom.
Now, how you came? It says here you are the last of 13 children.
Yes, I am.
Well, you are the living. You forgive me for interrupting you constantly, but Tom, do you realize you are the living embodiment of what I'm talking about? You're a character. And
thank you.
And yes, and I love characters. I'm a character. But
I wanted to before I got to my topic, I wanted to tell Sean no more rhyming. I mean it, and he'll understand what that means. And some of your listeners will too. I just saw the movie. Anyway, my parents told me in their late years that they got married planning to have 12 children. And so that part was intentional, and they wouldn't tell me which of the 13 was not planned, but one of us was. And since I'm the last one, there's a good chance it was me.
It would seem to be. It would seem to be that that's the case. Well, I'm glad whether you were planned or not. I just want you to know we're happy you exist, Tom. But I'm very serious about what I said. We know this Tom and Alvin, and he is a character, and he is funny. He's very witty. And he just embodies what I'm talking about, the individual ebullience of the individuality and the enthusiasm of these kids from large families. Karen in Prescott, Arizona, Dennis Prager, hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. I concur with absolutely everything you have said on two levels. As a retired teacher, having worked with many, many families, I have seen exactly what you're talking about. I have also seen some of those exceptions. As a mother and married to a wonderful man, having a beautiful marriage, but only 2 children, and there were health reasons why that happened. We would have liked to have had more, and we actually were told we couldn't have any, so we are very thankful for our 2. But we are estranged from one of the 2, which makes it so the other one only has 1 sibling. So on Christmas, it's just the 3 of us. Mm. So here again...
So is this another one of these examples of an adult child who doesn't speak to parents? Or is it you have chosen not to speak to the child?
No. She has estranged herself more from us. We have...
And from her sibling?
As far as the relationship goes, that is true. There is some contact, but no relationship.
Yeah. Well, this is a subject I've covered now for about 15 years. The epidemic in the United States of adult children who don't speak to parents. It's an epidemic. It's an unspoken... I don't know the difference between a pandemic and epidemic, so if the word is pandemic, I'll use that. But it's unspoken, and it's a catastrophe in the vast majority of cases. Yes. Those of you who are young enough to have to still make up your minds, I can see no argument against having more children, having a lot of children. And we have a call here, and forgive me, Stephen Van Nuys, only because of the time factor, and all of you stay on, because I'll either take you or summarize you, but it says it's irresponsible to encourage having large families, considering the strain it puts on the Earth's resources. Now, I see from Steve's age that he grew up in the time when that was really believed. The famous bet that was made between the Stanford professor and another professor on that very subject, the Stanford professor, Ehrlich, right? Paul Ehrlich, said that natural resources would be scarce because of the increase in population in the world. The opposite has taken place, in fact. Somebody told me, and I don't know if it's true, but I bet it's close to true, that the entire world could fit in Texas. This is nonsense. This is utter and total nonsense. But I'm sure the listener went to college. It's where you pick up nonsense. In fact, it's the countries that have a lot of young people that will flourish. It's precisely the countries that don't have young people and listen to this college-driven drivel that are going to face economic collapse. You are listening to the Dennis Prager Show. This is the Ultimate Issues Hour. Every Tuesday, the third hour of my show, I'm Dennis Prager, is devoted to some great issue of life. I have made the case for having a lot of children. And this reminds me to remind you that you have a way of rehearing or hearing what you don't hear on the show. It's called Pragertopia. It's a subscription to the show. You download it, and then you can share it with friends and so on, and keep it and rehear it or hear it for the first time. It's $5 a month. It's $5 away from free. That's the way I look at it. By the way, I think if it were free, I don't think that as many people would do it. I think people don't appreciate things that come free. It's human nature. I am one of them. Anyway, so it's pragertopia.com, and this is an example of such a show. If you have kids who are wondering how many kids they should have, or you are. John in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dennis Prager, hi.
Hello. Yeah, just, especially to that last point about encouraging parents to have larger families. My wife and I have 7, and we'll often run into families that maybe have 3, and they would like to have a bigger family, but they're a little concerned that, it's really busy. And we have found that, once past that third one, with 4 and 5 and 6.
That's when it gets easier.
It got a lot easier.
Yes.
Everybody we talk to with large families, it's always that same thing. After 3,
right,
it just gets easier. The children
people have just enough children to think how much of a burden children are, and then stop. You're so right. By the way, what religion are you?
Catholic.
Yeah, it's shocking. Didn't you all expect him to be secular? I am stunned that he's religious. I just have to say, because we have just a minute to go, just think for a moment how almost every value that the typical college has tried to impart in students has been wrong. This is another example of it. Don't have many children, right? Religion is nonsense. But you should have many children. America would be in much better shape. You would have more joy. The children would turn out, generally speaking, happier. And who are the people who are doing this wise thing? Religious people, the very people that your college mocked. That's my case. Enjoy your kids. I'm Dennis Prager. This has been the Ultimate Issues Hour.